So now we are well into Advent, I've started trying to do my Christmas shopping. In fact, Joyce and Christine can vouch for the fact that I've done Christmas shopping because they found me in Marks and Spencer's outlet panicking about it. Finding time to get to the shops is tricky, and if we do go out with two children, it's only so long before somebody has a tantrum. And I'm sure Craig would tell you that it's usually me. Shopping online isn't for everyone, and it's true that the convenience of it should sometimes be resisted, but I have to confess that it has really helped me out for some things. Aside from the greater concerns about buying online, in our house there is a much more minor but still significant problem. Can the parcel actually reach us safely? Delivery or taxi drivers, new postal workers, or anyone else looking for our vicarage just can't seem to find our house. Church friends have absolutely no problem though. They say, well, it's the one that looks like a vicarage. I wonder if it's a bit like in Harry Potter, where parts of the wizarding world aren't visible unless you're a wizard. Only Christians can find our house. That's hurdle number one. Hurdle number two is the fact that our doorbell doesn't work reliably, and because of the very heavy door, most of the time even knocking can't be heard, so we end up with parcels out in the rain or unnecessary trips to the delivery office. Hurdle number three is the most annoying, and crucially it's the one that's going to lead us into the actual sermon, and that comes when I open the door. You wouldn't believe how often I answer the door, wearing a collar, and somebody asks me, "Is the Reverend in?" When I reply telling them it's me, the answer comes, "Oh, I'm sorry, you weren't what I was expecting." Expectations are dangerous things. And expectations can also be incredibly powerful, and they can measurably change aspects of our lives. When I was a scientist, patients' expectations of their medications was something that I studied. It's a really interesting area, and I can talk about it at great length, but I won't. Science shows us that even when the dose is the same, the response to the drug can be improved by changing the colour and size of the pills. If you've ever wondered why painkillers are usually white, red or brown, but sleeping pills tend to be white, blue or purple, that's why. Branded painkillers are more effective than those in plain packaging because our brains fall for the shiny logos and inflated price tag and expect that the effect will be greater, and it is. These are very specific examples that I have experience with, but the same sort of effect is seen in lots of areas. If we expect something to happen, it changes how we perceive it when it does happen. Today's Gospel reading is all about John the Baptist and expectation. Last week we heard about his distinct style, calling people to repent and branding those who he thought were insincere as a brood of vipers. In last week's reading, he was clear that he is preparing the way for somebody greater than himself. Today's reading comes towards the end of John's prematurely shortened life. He has been imprisoned by Herod and sends word to Jesus, asking if he is the one who was expected or whether they should carry on waiting. I think on a first reading this is a bit confusing, as John the Baptist has already baptised Jesus, and he's been part of that amazing moment where the heavens open and the Holy Spirit comes down and God announces that Jesus is God's Son. For Christians, this moment is of massive significance, so I can't really imagine what it would be like to witness that. It's strange that John was part of that, and apparently still needs confirmation of who Jesus is. Well, there are a few different theories. One is that John thought from the style of Jesus' ministry that he was going to be the suffering servant figure that had been foretold, but not the conquering Messiah. He thought maybe these would be two different people. According to this theory, John is asking, so someone else is coming to do the riding on clouds and overthrowing the rulers. Another theory is that this question is to spur Jesus into getting on with bringing salvation. After all, he is in prison and could do with being saved himself. To paraphrase, if you really are meant to be the Messiah, can you get on with it? I'm stuck in prison. There are other theories, but I think most of them mainly come down to the fact that John was clear about his mission to prepare the way for Jesus, but he couldn't be entirely sure about what Jesus was actually going to do. Jesus and John are such different figures, and if I was planning a Christmas party, I would definitely want Jesus on the guest list. It's clear that he loved company and made the most of the gatherings he attended. Whereas John telling everyone to repent and munching on locusts, I think probably wouldn't set quite the right mood. John has a lot to teach us about expectations. Firstly, expectations can be a good thing. He trusted in what God had called him to and expected that it would be fulfilled. This shows great faith and discernment. But occasionally all of us wobble and wonder, really, God, are you sure you've got this? Perhaps the reading today shows us that John, faced with the reality of prison, needed some reassurance too. Expectations can be limiting. As I said at the beginning, expectation shapes how we experience things. Many of Jesus' followers couldn't see what he was doing because the way Jesus lived was so outside the boundaries they had put up. This wasn't just the case in Jesus' time. I think we are all probably guilty of doing the same thing now. And it's Jesus' answer that I really like. Go and tell John what you hear and see. The blind receive their sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the poor have good news brought to them. And blessed is anyone who takes no offence at me. I feel that Jesus is telling them to broaden their narrow expectations, to look more objectively. He is inviting them to keep themselves open-minded and open-hearted. Advent itself is a time of expectation. It's not a time to abandon expectations, just to question them and broaden them. I've been encouraged this year by many people around me questioning how they have approached getting ready to Christmas this year. One person I spoke to talked about the fact that it had become normal for her to get into debt for Christmas. But this year she had decided to try and break that damaging cycle by buying less. One person was debating about whether they should have Christmas with family just because they always did, even though it always ends in a blazing row, or whether instead they should do something more positive with their time. Others have been wondering if lots of presents are necessary to experience the wonder of Christmas. And as Christians, I think we would want to say, definitely not. The gap between our expectations of lots of people sitting around a table talking pleasantly to each other and a beautifully decorated tree with lots of presents doesn't really match up with the reality of our own Advent preparations, and this can cause us stress and upset. Widening these expectations can only be a good thing. As a society, we need to be more open-minded to what a good Christmas looks like. The same, of course, goes for Advent. Advent is not only a time to prepare for Christmas Day, it's a time to prepare ourselves to meet Jesus afresh again. My challenge to myself this Advent hasn't just been to get everything done. I probably won't, because my expectations are too high. It hasn't just been to have a small, eco-friendly, wholesome Christmas for the children. That's putting my own agenda onto Christmas and probably won't go how I imagine either. My real challenge is to prepare myself to be open-minded and open-hearted to the possibility that this Christmas God will do something to change my expectations. Like John, we know that God is acting in our world, but are we perhaps also too narrow in what we think God is up to? In Advent, we use a lot of language about keeping awake, watching and waiting. The passage today reminds us that we are not watching for a sunrise or waiting for a bus. We are expecting the unexpected. Let us pray. God of surprises, John the Baptist trusted that you were coming in glory. Inspired by him, give us faith and hope. In this time of Advent, the pressure to keep up appearances is great. Help us to be kind to ourselves and each other in our expectations for this season. Jesus challenged all expectations and broke all boundaries. Keep us open-minded and open-hearted to your presence, and continue to surprise us with your love. Amen.
Amen.